And Lorianne LaRocco, let's bring you in, global supply chain reporter for CNBC, Heather Boushey, former member of the Council of Economic Advisors, and Peter Baker, New York Times White House correspondent. Heather, starting with you, you worked with the now ousted Commissioner of Labor Statistics. What was her approach to her job, to the data collection, and what's your reaction to her sudden firing?
Well, this is just completely out of bounds. Erica McIntyre was a longtime civil servant for the Census Bureau. She is a person of integrity. She's a brilliant economist. Her work is well cited. She's a serious, incredible person. And I know that she took the responsibility of leading the Bureau of Labor Statistics very seriously. She got to lead a team that was putting together data that she herself had used as a researcher and understood that the credibility of that data is absolutely important. And, these are ungrounded complaints coming from the president. And, it's an attack on her in a way that should not be happening. The process to create this data is, very deep. There's dozens of people who are involved, and there's, this is just, it is really an attack on the credibility of the U.S. statistical agency.
Peter, the president was angered over these dismal job numbers that just came out yesterday and that substantive downward revision that we saw from May to June. Revisions, as we know, can be routine in these releases, but does the president have a point in being frustrated with that discrepancy?
Well, look, this is normal. This is nothing unusual here. This happens all the time. To be frustrated with reality is not to mean that it's the person who brings you the message at fault, right? He gave you no evidence whatsoever that she did anything to rig these numbers. He said it was his opinion, my opinion, he said. Well, my opinion is the same thing as a scientific argument that somehow the statistical collection is wrong. He just doesn't like the numbers, very clear. And the story he told yesterday, by the way, to justify this firing by saying she was politically biased, he had 100% wrong. He said she didn't release numbers until after the election, suggesting there had been fewer jobs created than previously reported. In fact, she released those numbers in August, before the election, when it would be most damaging to Democrats, not the other way around. And yet he continued to repeat that false story to justify a firing. This is part of a larger pattern with him. If you have facts that he doesn't like, he has made very clear in the second term, whether it be science, whether it be intelligence, whether it be vaccines, whether it be any number of different things, if you have contrary facts, you risk getting punished. Look what happened to Smithsonian. The Smithsonian History Museum has an exhibit on impeachments. It removed Donald Trump from that exhibit and said there are only 3 presidents who are threatened with impeachment removal. That would be Andrew Johnson, Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton, as if it never happened, because Donald Trump doesn't want, of course, that to be in a museum, or people don't believe he wants to do that and are preemptively acting on what they think would be his wishes.
Heather, let's touch on that for just a second. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has been one of those people to draw anger from the president by refusing to lower rates over concern about tariffs and inflation. The president railed against him yesterday in that Truth Social post. Are you concerned he could face the axe next?
Well, listen, I want to be very clear that what's going on here is that the president doesn't like the economic outcomes that he is seeing, and he's taking it out on, longtime servants of the public who have been acting with integrity. And, the thing about, just to go back for a moment to yesterday's data on the labor market, one of the things that we know is that it tends to be the case that you have big negative recessions when the economy is switching from growing to contracting. I'm not saying that we're going to see more such negative revisions in the future, but given all of the economic policies this president has put in place, we have all been watching with bated breath what would happen with the labor market. And yesterday's data indicate that there were actually many fewer jobs created than had previously been estimated as new data came in. The president doesn't like that answer, and he, especially on his big tariff day, because that has implications for the effectiveness of his economic policies. Now, with Jay Powell, it's the same thing. His policies have ballooned the deficit and debt. Now he has that as a problem, and he wants interest rates to come down. So he's saying, well, I'm going to make the Federal Reserve do what I want so that, the economic outcomes don't look so bad. But it is these civil servants, it is people like Chair Powell, like, Commissioner McIntyre, who are trying to help us understand what's really happening in the economy. And just because the president doesn't like it, he needs to accept responsibility for the economy that he is creating.
Obviously, Fed Chair Powell is looking at inflation, and we know that when there's a softening in the jobs market, sometimes the Fed Chair can decide that this is a ripe time to lower interest rates. That's what the president has been pushing for here. So could we see that happen?
Well, certainly, yesterday's labor market data is going to affect, how the Fed makes its next decisions. It probably makes it more likely that they do lower rates in the future because it does appear that the labor market is softening, and that is what we've all been concerned about. However, the tariffs that were put in place yesterday and other things that are happening throughout the economy are also raising costs for American families. This is putting the Federal Reserve in quite a bind, and because they have the dual mandate. They need prices to remain stable, and they need to keep us at full employment, or try to get us as close to that point. But certainly yesterday's news does indicate that the labor market is not as healthy as it was when the Federal Reserve made their decision earlier in the week.
Lorianne, let's bring you in here. Let's talk about the tariffs. Your recent piece for CNBC reads, Trump's new global tariffs add to risk of higher prices and less choice as retail's spring ordering season starts. So what's going on behind the scenes for wholesalers, distributors right now? You follow the supply chain. How much are the tariffs creating uncertainty for them?
The uncertainty is still there because a lot of the major trading partners, be it Canada, Mexico, and China, those are still in flux. And what our viewership really needs to realize is the timeline in terms of ordering. Retailers normally look at their future orders 6 months in advance. Wholesalers and retailers, they're a couple of months before that, so in upwards of 9 months. And so a good example in terms of not only the prices that we're seeing going up, it's the lack of breadth of product.
In a shocking move that has sent ripples through the economic and political spheres, the president has fired Erica McIntyre, the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, following the release of disappointing job numbers and a significant downward revision of employment data from May to June. The decision, announced yesterday, has sparked widespread criticism from experts who view it as an attack on the integrity of the U.S. statistical system. Heather Boucher, a former member of the Council of Economic Advisers, described McIntyre as a brilliant economist and a person of integrity who led the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, with a commitment to credible data collection. Boucher called the firing completely out of bounds, emphasizing that the process of generating labor statistics involves dozens of professionals and is deeply rigorous. She dismissed the president's claims of political bias as unfounded, noting that McIntyre's team released revised job numbers in August, before the election, contrary to the president's narrative that the data was withheld to influence political outcomes. The president's frustration stems from the latest labor market report, which revealed far fewer jobs created than previously estimated, painting a grim picture of the economy. Peter Baker, a White House correspondent, noted that such revisions are routine and not indicative of misconduct. He criticized the president for targeting McIntyre without evidence, suggesting the firing reflects a broader pattern of punishing those who present inconvenient facts. Baker pointed to a similar incident at the Smithsonian History Museum, where an exhibit on presidential impeachments was altered to exclude Donald Trump, seemingly to align with perceived presidential preferences. This trend, Baker warned, extends to other areas like science and intelligence, where contradictory data could lead to repercussions. The firing also raises concerns about the future of other key figures, notably Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, who has drawn the president's ire for resisting calls to lower interest rates amid concerns over tariffs and inflation. Boucher warned that the president's dissatisfaction with economic outcomes is leading to attacks on civil servants like Powell and McIntyre, who are tasked with providing objective insights into the economy. The labor market's softening, as evidenced by yesterday's data, may push the Federal Reserve to consider rate cuts, but new tariffs announced yesterday are complicating the economic landscape by raising costs for American families. Laurie and LaRocco, a global supply chain reporter, highlighted the uncertainty these tariffs are creating for wholesalers and retailers. With major trading partners like Canada, Mexico, and China facing potential tariff hikes, businesses are scaling back orders, leading to reduced product availability. LaRocco noted a 60% drop in Christmas tree imports as an example, with retailers already cutting back on spring orders due to tariff-related cost increases. The economic fallout from these policies is expected to hit consumers soon. Boucher explained that while businesses stockpiled goods earlier this year in anticipation of tariffs, those inventories are now depleting. The effects are likely to become evident in the coming months, particularly during the holiday season, with estimates suggesting tariffs could raise annual household costs by over $2,000. Compounding this, recent Republican budget legislation has increased healthcare costs for millions, adding to economic anxiety. Consumer spending has already slowed, signaling growing unease among families. As the nation grapples with these challenges, the firing of McIntyre underscores a troubling trend of undermining independent institutions when their findings clash with political narratives, raising questions about the future of data-driven policymaking in an increasingly polarized environment.